When I was a kid, before you had VHS, you had to make an appointment with the TV. And there was a show that I watched as a kid that had a profound impact on me. And now that I have a daughter who is 6, it's having a profound impact on her. So of all the panels that I've done, this one in particular really resonates with me. My name's Stephanie Strickland. I work for KGW here in town, and I like to think of myself, thank you, as the resident nerd and geek and all of it. But this panel, you guys, I'm going to have a moment. Now, my goal is to get to as many of your questions. You paid the admission. You deserve a chance to talk to this legend, really, when it comes to programming. So I'm going to ask for you guys to queue up at these microphones, and I'm just going to ping-pong back and forth, and we're just going to hear from the man himself. Are you ready? Give it up for Caroll Spinney. Come on out. I love this. You're getting like a standing ovation. Now, if you've ever read any of his interviews, you know that his rock, the person who has shaped his life and done many amazing things for him, is his wife, Debbie. And she is going to join him on the stage as well. Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions. We're going to start over here. Go right ahead.
All right, hi. I'm a second grade teacher, and my 7- and 8-year-olds have a really hard time thinking outside of themselves, especially when they're in a room with 22 other 7- and 8-year-olds. I know Big Bird gets along with everybody on Sesame Street, and I was wondering if he had any advice for my students on how to get along with their neighbor.
Advice from Big Bird.
Let's see. I don't think it's a song. I was dropped it. I'm hearing. Is that me talking?
Yes, it is.
Could you? I'm sorry. Can you just the last part of your question again?
Yes, I was wondering if Big Bird had any advice for my second grade students on how to get along with their neighbors.
Well, let's see. Be sure you have a lot of space. People crowded too close together tend to not get along as well. Although, as a puppeteer, sometimes it's quite absurd when you see how many puppets have been behind Oscar's trash can. Puppeteers. There's be as many as 8, and we're practically sitting on each other or reaching under their arm. And there's people there doing left hands, or right, left hands? Yeah, left hands. And we generally, because it's easy for us because we kind of all like each other, and we know it's kind of a hard thing to do. Puppetry is a great deal of hiding. We don't want to be seen. You want to see my head or an arm, and that happens every once in a while. You'll spot somebody, and sometimes they won't even. It'll get through editing and everything else, and they won't notice there's a whole head. Because one time I was sitting there watching. There's Jerry Nelson's head completely in the view. And he was a count. I am the count. I like to count things. We lost him about 3 years ago. He's a wonderful guy. And I'm scary, too, because he's the only other old guy. And but he's 6 months younger than me. And so we'll always miss Jerry Nelson. We called him the voice. That doesn't answer your question. How can kids get along? Give them boxing gloves so they don't hurt each other as much. No, I frankly, I'm not so. I was never really a good group person. They were usually punching me, or pushing me or something. I don't know what advice I could give.
Be 8 foot tall and have a lot of yellow feathers.
Yes.
Watch those kids line right up.
I had a couple of rap guys. One of them kept blowing the line over and over. He was doing the alphabet rap. He went one of the A to the B to the C to the D, and one was going like a beatbox thing, and but he kept leaving out one of the letters of the alphabet. And so he had to do it about 2 or 3 times, till finally the last time he got it right. And I asked, Big Bird then, instead of saying, "Here comes the bus," I said, "Here comes the bus. The bus is coming." They said, "Cut." And they said, "We'll have to do it again." And the guy says, "I have to say the rap again?" And the over the speaker, the director said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh boy." So he says, "You causing me to have to do it over again. Stupid bird." And he hauled off and punched Big Bird right in the face. Knocked him right off my hand. And
Not a good thing to do.
that wasn't a good thing. He never worked there again. And although I understood, he became quite famous after that. I don't know what's the name. I don't remember the name.
Don't be a jerk. That's really a good tip, too,
So-
for the kids. Let's take a question over here.
I was wondering if you could give me your favorite moment working on Sesame Street, as well as Big Bird's and Oscar the Grouch's.
Well, with Big Bird, it's almost always the sad one, the death of Mr. Hooper. It's one of the finest scripts we ever got to do, and it was a very serious one. Mr. Hooper had died. Will Lee, actually, that played it. And when he died, they decided to retire the role, of course, and not try to recast him. Or they could decided they could just say he had decided to retire in Hawaii, in Florida or something, because we do it in New York. That's where everybody goes from New York if they want to retire. And or they said, or we could actually deal with the death of Mr. Hooper, which is something they hadn't. We have children who are 2, 3, 4, even younger now. But that was about 1984 or so. And so they decided to deal with death. And so Big Bird doesn't, he's like a lot of children, they don't understand about it. I know my son was 4 when it was on, and he didn't understand it either. And so the script was beautifully written, and Big Bird has drawn some pictures of everybody in the cast, but we just pretend they live there, you know. And so he said, "Where's Mr. Looper? I want to give him his drawing." They said, "Well, gee, Big Bird, don't you remember? We told you he died." "Oh, I know you told me, but when's he coming back? I want to give it to him myself." He says, they then realized he didn't understand it. And they said, "Well, Big Bird, you have to understand that when people die, they don't come back." He said, "Never?" And he got very shook up. And I'm a very emotional person. And I got shook up too, but I think it was the way it was what the script called for. And so he said, "Well, but who's going to tell me stories and make me my birdseed milkshake? And give it those great big straws so the seeds can go through." And so they said, "Well, we'll do those things." And but they tried to explain it to him, and he says, "Well, it's so sad." As soon as Big Bird said, "But it's just so sad," and the whole cast started to cry, and we had to finish the scene. The scene that you saw on TV was the very scene, the one and only scene we did. They said, let's do a Hail Mary, they said, and do it again. And we started. I said, "We didn't do this again. The other was perfect." It was. So. Thank you. And
It's
Oscar, what about the best Oscar one? Any suggestions? Oscar is a lot of fun, and I never played a character like him until I got this thing. Both characters were created by Jim Henson, who created the Muppets, and
I think you always like Oscar best when he has someone to play against, like making Bob eat with a spoon that sprays everything all over his
It's
face.
the
or-
taxi driver all
The-
over again. He
the
plays
ta-
off. He's the taxi driver with the cigar in his mouth who he's based off of. He's playing off someone in the back seat. That's Oscar.
Yeah, Oscar, for back in the early days of the show, we taped 10 shows a week, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Now it takes about 2 or 3 days to get one script done because it's so much more elaborate. They put too many computer-generated effects and stuff like that. So the show, in a way, was more fun to do when we could just keep flying along with the scripts.
You could ad-lib a lot more in the old days. too.
We could ad lib a lot too.
Yeah,
And
because now the script is much longer, so you really have to follow through, or you'll throw somebody off if you throw something that you just thought of in there. You know, in the old days, it was kind of Jim, Frank, Caroll, Jerry just throwing things around, and it was funny to watch. It was really funny.
we had fun doing it because you kind of, and if to get ahead with the Muppets, it was good that you had the natural ability to ad lib and think of something funny. You have to stick with the storyline, and you'd ad lib and keep the story, but you say it your own way. And often would be a joke that we could fit right into the words, so as long as it didn't detract, we had the ability to do it. I think that's one reason why it was so successful, that we just rolled along, and it was so much fun. And but later on, it's now we have to stick to every word the way it's written. And there's good writing. You know, one of the writers had 3 top hits going at the same time on Broadway. He's writing. We did 2 or 3 scripts. It takes about 2 or 3 months for each script to be completed because they have to go over it and over it, rewrite and rewrite. But most plays and television is done that way. There's so much rewrite at the last minute too, after they stayed up half the night rewriting it with a committee, and then just you think you finally got the final draft. No, stop. Wait, don't say the scene yet. We're going to delay for a couple of minutes. They're still rewriting that last scene, and which is amazing.
When I don't know about you, but when when the Game of Thrones episode came on, I've watched it more than my daughter. She's like, "Mom, again?" Yes, we are watching it again. It's brilliant. That and True Blood. True Mud. All right, which side am I on? I like to flip-flop back. Go right ahead, please.
You kind of already answered my question when you were talking about scripts and everything because, okay, I'm calming down. When you were talking about the death of Mr. Hooper, I just watched that video again the other day, and it brought back memories for me that somebody tender and loving for me had died. And then with the episodes after 9/11, too, when Big Bird's nest got trashed, and he's just saying, "My home, my nest." And I appreciate the honesty and that you're willing to deal with these things because, you know, I saw Supergirl over yesterday and started crying and hugged him because I was 3 again, but now I have my own child, and it just, the honesty of even the bad things in life, it was great when her grandfather died. We were able to explain that because people die just because. And then you were talking about scripts and everything because obviously those scenes are so honest. How can you script something like that? And but so since you've already answered my question, just thank you. Now that I'm well into my 40s, like you, Stephanie, too, I will catch myself watching old episodes on it. We saw
1, 2, 3,
pigeons.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, I understand.
I broke
It was
into
Grace Slick, yeah.
What?
It was Gracie
Grace
Slick
Slick.
from Grateful Dead.
Really?
We use a lot of real people, real important people too, with their music, and we'd never even say that's Grace Slick, you know, or have.
I didn't know. I mean, until this moment.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've done my homework. That's so cool.
Or Stevie Wonder singing Superstitious, too. That's one of my earliest memories. So thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for
You're
a
welcome.
lifetime and continued
Thank you.
love.
Thank you.
Okay. I was just wondering, since you play both Big Bird and Oscar, I was kind of wondering how you're able to manage to juggle between the two in the very same scene they share together. I mean, how are you able to manage Big Bird and Oscar just literally talking to each other and it's just you?
Well, I've done scenes like that. That we eventually, one time we did a scene with Granny Bird shows up every 10 years. She's overdue. I haven't seen her for a while. I play her too. And one time I had recorded her voice separately because a different puppeteer is in that bird suit. And it's really a puppet so big you get inside, like Big Bird. And I had recorded it a week before, so when we were actually doing the show a week later, and I was doing Big Bird, and somehow I thought my interpretation was wrong when I heard them play back what I decided a week before without doing the whole show, all the script, all the lines together. And I thought that I really should re-record Granny again, but there was no time to do so. So the other puppeteer, who was the guy who normally played the bear in the Blue House, he was my assistant for a number of years, and he then became a puppeteer, and he's terrific. African-American guy. Anyway,
Noel McNeil.
Noel McNeil. Fantastic guy. So I did both. I was doing Big Bird's voice, and then I would do Granny Bird, and Big Bird was being petulant. It was the scene about losing his nest. Hurricane had destroyed it totally. And Granny came over to explain to him, if he starts building it, he'll just know how to do it. He's a bird. Birds know that. And they should talk about instinct. We never once used the word. But I had to have, she was consoling, and whereas Big Bird was being obstinate and petulant about even trying it. And so she had to convince him to brace up and do it right. And I think that was one of the best moments I ever had doing it, because I had to play two characters, one trying to be consoling and helpful, and the other being not helpful and being dragging his feet. And so, but normally what we do, if for instance Oscar and Big Bird are talking to each other, I'll pre-record whichever one is the less words to say. Usually it's Oscar if it's Big Bird too. And so I'll play the one that talks the most live, and another puppeteer will wiggle the dummy, as we call it. One time, that came about one time, in the first few weeks of Sesame Street, it was a new cameraman, and he was trying to focus. He said, would you hold up one of the dummies so I can shoot it and see how I should focus that? And so we thought, hold up a dummy? It's we call Ernie a dummy.
Like, he's heavy.
And so after that, we always said, okay, time to go wiggle the dummies. Wiggle the dummy. And there's a lot more work than just wiggling it.
That's a great answer. Over here?
First, I just want to thank you for being so dedicated to such a beautiful show that impacted so many.
Thank you.
I am actually wondering how the show has impacted you the most, in what areas?
Well, it isn't all just going home thinking about the scripts you've done or the feelings you had while you're doing it. Of course, it was a fairly good paying job. Eventually, it got to be quite good in the middle. Then Jim died, and it changed a lot of things. It impacted me. It's because it's been fully 45 years I've been doing it now. Love a show that lasts. and of course, the greatest thing happened during it was that I met Deb on set. I spotted this girl. I said, "My God, is she gorgeous and and cute too." So
42 years ago.
so I don't go into the humorous story of our beginning of our relationship because it's in the movie I Am Big Bird. I don't want to
Yeah.
spoil it for you.
It's a funny story.
So I won't tell you the funny part of it. But I saw her, and of course, we've been together 42 years. Once I dated her, it was the first night we both, later on we told each other that that night I told her that I knew I was going to marry you after that one date. I could tell it.
He
And
waited
she's-
13 days to ask.
Oh, really?
But I knew that first night, and she did too. Right? So, but 13 days later, we're walking down Broadway, and I just couldn't think of what life would be like if she wasn't in it anymore. So I whirled her around. I said, "You will marry me, won't you?"
Yes. I was scared.
So we do have an age difference. I'm 100 years older than her.
17.
17, yeah.
Nothing at all.
But to me, I just say, this, because of that, she always seems like she's 17 to me.
That's nice. That's beautiful, beautiful. Let's go over here.
Yeah, my question is in regards to I Am Big Bird for both of you. Were there stories that the documentarians asked you about that were hard for you to talk about?
No, I don't think so.
You're very open and always have been.
I think we don't mind talking about it, and particularly since they handled it so well, we could tell that they were, it's a real story, and but she and I kind of face life pretty much the same way, and people often say, "What's the secret?" Secret is to marry somebody who's a lot like you,
We like the same
except
things.
she's a girl.
That helps. But we really, when we met the guys from Copper Pot Pictures, we instantly had a rapport with them, and we were shocked that anybody was suggesting making a movie about his whole life. I don't know why we were shocked, but it just never came up before. But we really love these guys, and you kind of have to because they came up to our house, and they came with empty cars, each of them, and they took away carloads of every home movie we've ever taken, which is a lot of stuff, and every photograph. We have a room built just for all the pictures that we've taken, and it's all well categorized and all that stuff. So when we said to the guys, "Oh, I don't know if you'll really be interested, but if you'd like, you can look through all our home movies and photographs," and they nearly fainted because for a documentary, that's what you want. So we just love these guys, and we trusted them, and it came out to be something better than even we imagined.
They took them 2.5 years just to go through the videos and things. But
They did.
nice
I
thing-
wondered if I hadn't labeled something and I didn't want them to see it. But thank God, if it happened, they didn't tell me. Forget that.
They were cool, and they didn't put any of those into the movie.
Yeah, that's right. That's the bonus reel that comes out in 10 years. I'm teasing. Let's go over here.
I'm the second of 5 generations deep into Sesame Street, and I'd just like to thank you for helping me raise my kids, and now I'm raising my grandchildren on your show. Thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you.
very welcome. Thank you.
We were talking backstage, and I basically said something very similar, and you told me at the time that, 100% you meant it. You must have heard this a million trillion times, and every time you take a moment to say thank you. That's it's very humbling. It's very nice to have that interaction with you, and I know lots of people here feel the same way. But how many times do you hear it? Like all day long when people figure out who you are and what you do?
I'd like to talk to the people who happen to come to the booth where they can get an autograph if they want. But I like to talk to them as well, not just to take their money.
He does. He's really, no, you really,
but,
I think this is the one kind of a place that you do hear that all day long, and you can certainly never hear it enough. And it's just, when you have somebody come up to you, and like we had over here before, people crying because it's it meant so much to them as kids, and they say beautiful things like, you don't know what a comfort you were when I was little, or, I learned how to read with you by the time I was 2, and I think that's what you get from this kind of a situation more than anywhere else, because when we're home, it's not like we're walking down the street and people are coming up to them going, I can't believe it's you, this is where you get the most love.
And I noticed, I'm talking with some of the other signature signers, that they have, a lot of people are quite emotional when they go up to speak to them. And I said, well, look at it this way. You when they go see the show, that they like you, why they're coming here. In some cases, there's only one or a few movies. I've even talked to one. The only thing he ever had was one scene in a movie. He said, "These are not the droids you're looking for." And yet he had people in line, and people just loved Star Wars so much that it's a wonderful place to think back on. It's all nostalgia a great deal. Nostalgia is a wonderful thing because it makes you comfortable. And you heard it at a time when your life's problems were not evident. You're just lost into that movie or whatever it is you're seeing, or television seeing act. And so people, when they talk to you, they feel that they're part of that scene. And I think that I'd like to share that too. I think that's a realization that I had that I like myself. That you're all. It takes an audience to make a show complete, and their feelings add to our feelings, and what we do is a combination of a lot of people. Like there's probably about 95 people behind every show of Sesame Street. If you look at the writers and all the people who work, they have a lot of interns, and some of them end up staying because they proved themselves so useful. But I just want to thank the audience for liking us.
Thank you.
The thing is, too, and I think you will agree with me, that there's something uniquely special about doing a show as profound as Sesame Street, or whatever it was that shaped you as a kid, because it sticks with you as an adult. There are things that have come into my existence that I liked as an adult, Battlestar Galactica, Firefly, but they didn't profoundly alter who I was, and that's what makes a moment like this on stage with you so special, because Sesame Street, for so many of us, really did shape who we were as kids, and I think that's it's nice to see so many people here sharing those moments with you. Let's take it over here for a question.
I'm going to add to the long list of people saying thank you again. I think you and Jim and Frank and Jerry, you guys provided the characters that became a lot of our childhood's first best friend, and that's profound. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the character development of Oscar or Big Bird, because the other Muppeteers have gone on saying they bring things to the characters that weren't normally there. Bert, his favorite food was Melba toast, and
it figures.
Yeah, something boring. But there's Oscar the Grouch. Yeah, he's grouchy and he's dirty, but he has a soft side to him too. He would always call Maria skinny and kind of play back and forth with that.
She'd always say to me, even after I love it when Oscar calls me skinny.
and we did too, and we learned, as children, we learned empathy from that, along with, that the characters weren't one-dimensional. They could be multi-dimensional, and it was okay. And I wonder if you could speak to how those types of character traits were gently brought in and nurtured that way.
Well, I think the biggest, quickest change was Jim was a genius, and he created so many shows and thoughts. I usually found that he was working on 12 really important projects at the same time. Often we'd have lunch with him. He wouldn't even mention them, whether he was going to be on TV that night. We'd just accidentally find, he's on this show tonight, and he didn't even mention it. But one of the things he planned was that Big Bird was a goofy, silly bird And I said, how should I play him? He says, well, think of it as Mickey Mouse's pal Goofy. Oh, hi there. So Big Bird, in the first scene you see him in, you've seen it on the old school videos, which is, hey, I'm Big Bird. And or he could have said, I love you, you love me, and it sounded pretty much like today's gone by character. So anyway, but so one day a script came, and so I was playing Big Bird like the goofy guy with either a little bit Mortimer Snurd like a yokel, and a script came that Big Bird was wondering why these kids were all going into this place, which turned out to be a daycare center. Big Bird wanted to go and join him. I said, he's just a great big 8-foot tall goofy guy. Would you really want him hanging around your children? You don't know. So I said, don't you think I should play him as a kid? Like he's a child who wants to go play with those other children. I know when I was in the second or third grade, there was a boy that came named Frank Sardenta. He was over a head taller than me, and he just seemed like as big as big boys. And I was this little tiny runt, and teased a lot. And so I thought, sure, it's okay, Big Bird's 8'2", because on TV, most TVs at that time were probably 19-inch sets.
I remember.
Yeah, and so Big Bird would never appear to be much taller than 7 or 8 inches. And children don't understand the thing. Sometimes when they see the real thing, and Big Bird really is 8 feet 2, and if they see him and they start crying because that's a big looking thing. They run away. But television doesn't. It just seems to change the impressions of what you're seeing.
So Big Bird is 6 years old.
So I decided at that time, though, in the early days of Sesame Street, probably a couple months in, maybe. He couldn't read. He didn't know the alphabet. Like Abkadefki Jekyll Monopolis Tuberses. What a remarkable word. I wonder what it means. It was a combination of the letters he had to learn to do it. So I figured since he was just learning how to count, and he didn't get up to 10 until about halfway through the first year, and he would be a little bit slower than the real kids. And I decided he was 4 and a half.
Uh-huh.
But then within a year or so, the writers got used to him knowing how to read and a little. And so he would come on and do things like a poem by Big Bird. That's me. And they'd do like a 4-line poem. And now if he's writing poems, he's no longer 4 and a half. So I decided, I think, so they had a show, I don't know when it aired, but it was his birthday coming up on the show. And I said, well, he's going to be 6. So every time his birthday comes, he's 6.
My kind of birthday.
I wish I could do that because I was 35 when I got the job, and now I'm over 50.
Very good.
Why don't you tell them how old you really are?
Me? 81.
Which side are we on? Are we over here? Go ahead.
So earlier this week, I saw a documentary on Jim Henson on PBS, and one of the scenes that really stood out was Jim's funeral. And so, I mean, I got a little emotional just watching it, and of course I wasn't there. And like the scene with you as Big Bird there, I don't know, singing or
Yes.
doing the eulogy or something.
I sang It's Not Easy Being Green because Brian Henson,
Yeah.
his oldest son, asked me if I would sing it.
So since you were there, I mean, what memories do you have of that occasion? I mean, just how emotional was it for you and other cast members and people that worked with him?
Well, Jim had lightened it up before he died by suggesting even the songs and things we did were his suggestions. He didn't know he was dying. He was only sick for 4 days, and he suddenly died. And but he had said he'd do someday he would. So he decided one time he had nothing much to do, so he made a list of songs that would be good, and the way to do it. He said he didn't want it to be a dark funeral with dark clothes and all that stuff. Wear the brightest orange stuff you got, you know. and sing great songs. He even had one of the bands from New Orleans. What they call that music?
Dixieland?
Yeah, and he had the one who was famous for When the Saints Come Marching In. That's what we all marched out of the church, which is the biggest cathedral in the world, the St. John Divines, New York City. So
it was very moving, and of course it was horrendous time for us all who loved Jim very much. And it took about 5 days for us. We all gathered together right after we heard the news down in New York City, and it was about 5 days of thinking, how are we going to have this celebration of Jim's life? And it was probably in many ways, the most wonderful thing we ever did, because we were so together and so, Louise Gold, who worked on The Muppet Show with Jim, sang Jim's favorite song at the time, which was Bring Him Home from Les Miserables. And I don't know how she ever got through that, because I can't even listen to it anyway. But that was his favorite, so she sang that, and then of course all the Muppets did beautiful music, and here you are up in this grand cathedral with Big Bird singing It's Not Easy Being Green. I will never know how Caroll got through that, because I don't know, even just watching it every time, we cry every time. But he got through it and was beautiful, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. But Jim would have loved it, everybody was in their bright clothes, and it was just the most magnificent gathering of love, and I love with the butterflies.
yes, the Muppet Workshop said, "Look, we want to make something special." They made 1,000 butterflies, each of them on about a 3.5-foot wire that would be flexible. And so they said at a certain point that you can keep them under your chair. They're rather delicate butterflies, like real ones are, and they
We still have
made
ours.
of very thin plastic. And there would be a lot of work. All these ones hand cut and painted. So they said, okay, this is the time when you want to use the butterflies. So they all came up.
All these butterflies fluttering
All over the
with
place.
everybody with their rods, being a puppeteer, and you just look at this cathedral, a sea of butterflies flying. It was the most beautiful thing, and you just felt good that you were being a part of that, So it was magnificent.
I found myself not allowing myself the privilege of crying, because I certainly loved Jim. We got to be such good friends. Every time, once in a while, he'd call us up and say, "We're working too hard," which would be something for him. He said he'd rather work than do anything, and it's true. But he said, "I want to go to the movies," and one of the ones that stands out in our minds was when we went
The
to
Princess
Bride.
Yes.
That was fun.
Yes.
But when I was singing, I didn't take the words inside Big Bird. There is room for a little bit of script in there, and I was sure I knew it, as I did it so many times in practice and rehearsal. Yet I blew a line, said about the sea, deep as the ocean, I was supposed to say, but I said as big as the ocean, then it's as big as a tree, and that's using the word big twice. It's very redundant.
But you made it rhyme still.
So when I got to the end of I had to make up a line in the middle, and I was able to at least make it rhyme, like you said. And when I walked back, I get back into my regular clothes, and his widow was sitting there, Jane Henson, and she said, "Good save."
That's a great question.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go over here, and we have just about 5 minutes left.
I just wanted to add to the list of people that have thanked you. As a preschool teacher, I will pull up some older Sesame Street videos I watched and play them at circle time, and they are really into it. So thank you for that. But also, when you were talking about the death of Mr. Hooper, I felt like I had to get up and talk about it, because I cried a lot when I saw it the first time. But when I was 12, my brother passed away, and it was really hard, but I had a 6-year-old brother, or 5, and we actually played the Mr. Hooper episode to help him kind of get through it, because it is hard, and I just always remember that, and that's one of my favorite memories, and so I just wanted to thank you for being able to have such emotional parts that can really help a family, and when I see it, I still think of it, and it still, like, it makes me feel better still, so I just really wanted to get up and thank you
Thank you.
for that.
It's lovely. Thank you.
I was at some other signature show about a month or two ago, and a young man said that he was 7 years old and his father died. And it was devastating. They were close, father and son, and he was destroyed over it. And about 5 days later, that episode came on for the first time. He was just timing was right, and he sat there through it mesmerized, and he realized that it was affecting him in a very proper way. He said, it got me through a lot better. I understood how nice that was that he had seen that, and it really was a comfort to him.
Like your story, it's very
I was delighted at
wonderful you can do
it was
that.
written by Norman Stiles, who was our head writer at the time, and I didn't know he would do such a sensitive, beautiful script. It's beautiful.
I have never teared up more at a panel. My palm is red. This is a TV news anchor trick. I dig my fingernail into my palm to distract me because I'm a blubber and a really ugly crier. But the stories are beautiful, so I'm trying to spare you from this. It's just so nice. I'm going to guess we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Let's go over here.
We've talked a lot about how things have changed. I'm curious about your thoughts about the future of Sesame Street, puppetry, and of course Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch.
Right. Well, one I'll try to remember the other points, but one about puppetry. Somebody said, "Do you think puppetry has any future?" Because CG, computer-generated films, for instance, Pixar stuff is unbelievably wonderful. Look at Frozen and things like that. But because these things can be done with like that, but I think puppetry has a long and big future. So those who still aspire to be puppeteers, don't give it up, because puppetry is instant. If I was allowed to have Oscar here, I don't own him.
You should.
You bet.
I agree. So, but I didn't invent him, of course they're worth a lot of money apparently. And
Puppets you can hug. You can't hug a picture.
and they can.
You know?
That's very true. Hug is fun. But also they can act on the instant. Somebody can say something and react to it right there and then. Whereas with CG, it's months of planning, and then you have to do all the construction the way they do it in computers to make it all work. So that's just one facet of your question. What's some more?
I think were
The
you
future.
referring to like the future of Sesame Street and things like that?
Sesame Street, Oscar, Big Bird.
Yeah, they're
Well,
still going
I
strong.
know that they're very eager to keep the characters very strong, and we've had as many as 1 year we had a viewer slump. So many people were tuning in the 90s, so they started analyzing the show. Well, where did we go wrong? And at one point, there were 22 puppet characters on the show, and all the way from Wanda the fish, who was a wandering fish. She actually had a globe of water on the puppet's head, this fish.
It was too many characters, though.
And they decided there's too many characters, so they've been analyzing and realizing lately. I was delighted to hear that Oscar has been trending very well. And there are a lot of complaints they weren't seeing much on the show, and I agree. And I hope to see that different, because I've always felt I was going to try to do at least 50 years of Sesame Street. I have only we're ahead 1 year, so we only have
3 years left for 50. And he'll keep going.
But,
I want to, since we do have to conclude this panel, just let this a boy here ask his final question of the panel.
So, what my question is, what do you do when you're not acting?
That's a great question.
well, living very happily. We live up in the country, 150 miles from New York. I've commuted all these years.
Wow.
Not every day, because I'd want to shoot myself.
But Caroll likes to draw a lot. He's a really good artist. So when he's not puppeting, he's drawing all the time. And we love to have picnics. So we have on our property, we have little picnic spots, and we'll say, okay, where are we going to have dinner today? We'll say Lover's Leap or lots of names, usually after the kids or after the family and stuff. We have all these little spots. And we do like to travel, so we're glad to be here because we've never been here before.
Welcome to Portland. Welcome, welcome. Scoot down. I want to take a picture of us together because this is a moment.
A selfie.
A selfie. Here we go. Thank you. Oh gosh, my daughter's gonna love this. You guys, please, a standing ovation.
Thank you so much.
Caroll, Debbie, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you. I'm going back to my booth. We have some more autographing to do.
Come by the booth, he says. Come by the booth and chat.
Come see us.